cannot be measured with a yardstick, with a ruler. And like honesty, influence cannot be handled or carried in pockets. Influence cannot be scrutinized through the lenses of scientists' microscopes. It cannot be observed through telescopes, and it cannot be reflected in any mirror or image. Yet, it is still a potent thing. It is still a powerful thing. It is still a strong thing. And you can no more prevent what you are, or what you say, or what you do from affecting other people than you can prevent your own body from casting a shadow when the sun is out. You can't do it. You have influence. Deal with it. What you do with it, though, is another matter. Now, influence is the connecting of two Latin words, in flow, which very easily means flow in or to flow into. It is something that is poured out of you and into something else. Your life, your example, your spirit flows into everyone around you. That's why, haven't you noticed that when you're having a bad day, or you wake up on the wrong side of the bed, and you wake up and you look at your spouse, your kids, and it's like, you don't even have to say anything. They're like, oh, it's one of those days. Watch out. It's one of those days. You're influencing everything you do, everywhere you go. You are emanating your influence on people. You will change the decisions that they make. You will alter the courses of their lives by the influence that you have. When God made us, He gave us a great gift. He gave us a talent. And it's a talent that we are all responsible for. I don't think that we talk enough about the influence that we have on people. We say, well, no, they got to make their own decisions. Hold on, don't just be passing the buck. You have a lot to do with the decisions that other people make. And you have a great influence in their lives. The greatest treasure of the gospel was put in earthen vessels. We may not be congressmen and senators or diplomats, but we still have influence. We have the greatest influence because the greatest gift was put in these earthen vessels. And so we have the greatest influence. Sometimes somebody says, look, I ain't got no influence. I don't have ability. I don't know how to affect other people. And you perhaps have heard this before. Well, I heard a simple story once that addresses this. There was a lighthouse keeper who was carrying a small candle up to the top of the lighthouse. And they began to have a conversation. The little candle looked at the lighthouse keeper and said, where are you taking me? And he said, I'm taking you somewhere where you're going to be a great light. So the candle responded, how can that be? That can't be. I'm a very small candle. I have a very small flame. How can I project a great light? And so the lighthouse keeper said, don't worry about that. Leave that up to me. And soon that magnificent light began to shine as that small candle was placed atop that lighthouse. And that light began to shine out across the ocean and the seas. And it all began with a small little candle. So the truth is that you never can underestimate your influence. You never can underestimate the power that you have on people. And so you have to be careful what you say, and what you do, and what you allow in your life. Because you have influence on people that you perhaps don't realize that you have influence upon. Paul said, be thou an example to the believers. That's what he told Timothy. Be thou an example to the believers. Have good influence in your church, Timothy. Have good influence on the congregation. Be a positive influence in their lives. Now, Timothy was a young man. He was not to wait till he was old to be an example. It's not just your age that determines whether or not you can be an example. a young person and still be an example to people. It's not where you are in your life, how old you are in your life. It's what you choose to do. You can exert influence in a positive way now. Right now. You don't have to wait until, you're old to be influential. You can begin now. Someone depends on you as a Christian. And whether you know it or not, someone is following you. There's a story of a clock in a window in a small western town. It was inside of a jewelry store. And it was there, and people all over the town set their watches by it. Schools, banks, everybody depended on this one clock that was in the jewelry store. Until one day it stopped. When it stopped, children were late to school, businessmen didn't reach their meetings, and the whole town was thrown off schedule, all because, listen, their standard fell. The standard by which they marched, the standard by which they organized their lives, the standard by which they did everything stopped functioning. Somebody is looking at you as their example. You are somebody's standard. You are somebody's standard. And the moment you stop functioning the way you should be functioning, their lives go out of whack. Their lives go out of control. Now, you may not think you're a hero, but you are somebody's hero. Somewhere. Somebody looks at you and says, if I could just be like them, if I could just have that quality, if I could just take some of what they have. But the problem is that you don't always do what you should. And so when you don't, it causes chaos in their lives. Be thou an example. Now, one thing we have learned is that man is a natural imitator. He's just an imitator. You just look at a kid. You do something the kid doesn't. They just copy you. There was this little guy in our church in Panama. My sister Sophia will remember. There was a little guy, Jonathan, and he was so little, and he wanted to be just like my dad. I don't know how old he was, 3 or 4 or 5 years old. And so he would get. My dad had gray hair. He'd get talcum powder, and he'd put it on his hand, and he'd want to go to church like that with talcum powder. And my dad, when he worships the Lord, I don't know, he still did this little shindig, this little shindig. And so little Jonathan, he'd get in the back with his talcum powdered hair, and he'd sit there while the worship was going. He's doing this little shindig. And my dad raised his hand, he raised his hand. Just imitate. Man is an imitator. Students imitate their teachers. Soldiers imitate their trainers. Either a good example or a bad example. We all exemplify something. The Apostle Paul commends the early Christians in Thessalonica to be good examples. And the first thing he tells them in verse number 6 is that the first thing they should do is imitate Christ. Because if I'm imitating Christ and somebody's imitating me, then they are also imitating Christ. So the first thing that we are to do is that we are to imitate Christ. Because something